Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Zeo. We are here to discuss her up-and-coming book, Unleash the Legend Monkey. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Glad to be here.
Yes. We were actually really happy you reached out in your email because the way you describe it, and I don't know how many people read the email and are familiar when you say Journey to the West. For me, I love that story. I've watched probably the American movies come out long time ago. I love the story. How did this come about? Because there's been a lot of renditions that people have done of Journey to the West, but you might be the first person that has done this rendition of the story.
Yeah, I was born and raised in China. I only came to America when I was 23. So I identify myself as more Chinese than American. Yeah. And I feel like kids in my generation and maybe like a generation back, we all grew up watching the TV series Journey to the West. When you search, you can search the clips on YouTube. I think it was shot in 1984. The special effects is just horrid. It was it's 10 times worse than the first Star Wars. That's how bad it is. And they don't know how to do green screen. They borrowed machines from Japan, and they don't know how to use it. So every time you see Monkey, the main character, flying in the sky, somehow he became this 2D character in a live action television. It has an endearing veneer. Now you look back, but when we were kids and when I was a kid, that's how I didn't grow up with Star Wars. I didn't grow up with all the Marvel and DC heroes that American kids grew up with. That is kind of my superhero. And still till this day, it remains as my number one superhero just because how unique the character it is. And then you mentioned there are a lot of renditions in the East and in the West about the story. The story traces all the way back. Journey to the West is the title of a 16th century Chinese fantasy novel. Yep. And it was written in 15-something. But the first time the story popped up is several hundred years before that. And you can trace it all the way back to, I believe it's BC 300. There's certain regions in China, about the southwest region in China. They have certain like monkey and gibbon worship. So they built like temples, and then that's the starting of the lore. And then throughout history, they do like stage plays, kind of like it's like, this is before Shakespeare's time. So they have like a group of people, they have like a kind of like a itinerant touring company. They will go to travel and they will stop by village. They set up like a stage and then they just do the play. And then they collect, money from the patrons and they keep going. So that's actually, obviously we don't know the full picture, but there's certain like snatches of stories like that. And then when it comes to Journey to the West, the very title that was coined by Wu Cheng'en, the author in 16th century. I believe he's the first person that kind of collect all the snatches of characters from all the plays and folklores and, just storytellers like our bard, and then write like beginning, middle, and backstory and write it in the linear version. So it's like a whole saga. It's a huge book. So that is the beginning of it. And it makes sense because the story, the vitality of it is so much that for thousands of years, seriously, people are obsessed with it. And there's televisions done. I think the first television series is actually from Japan. I believe it's either 68 or 72. I think Monk was played by a woman. And it was even that special effects is better than the Chinese version. But most Chinese people from the mainland, their first introduction of the story is definitely the 1980, I want to say 84 or 86 TV series. And I watched that series probably about, I don't know, 100 times. It was still replayed. I remember I remember certain, like, I have this cousin who is a bigger fan even than I am. He can repeat every single line. He'll watch the show, and then before the characters say a line, he would just utter the next line. And there's one scene in the original story. It's kind of like a touching story. Like, two characters have this rift, and then Monkey supposedly going to leave Monk, forever. And then I remember I was crying, and then I got a phone call, and I pick up the phone. It's my cousin, and he was crying on the other end. So that's how much I liked it. And then afterwards, go back to the rendition part. There's video games, there's like TV series, but I would say the most successful rendition or inspiration, I think, is Dragon Ball Z. If you think about it, the whole character setup, and a lot of it is hugely based on Journey to the West. That's pretty widely known. There's also the Journey to the West. There's a Japanese manga. I forgot the name of it. Let me show you. Let me search it real quick. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay, so this one is less known. It's called Sayuki.
Yes.
So this is very interesting. I feel like this is kind of like a woman-oriented manga, because all the characters are very handsome. They're almost like romance novel characters. It's kind of like a boy band all of a sudden. Although they have weapons, like Pixie in the original story is supposed to be this ugly pighead monster / god, but in this one, Pixie is the hottest among the four. So that's very interesting. And the other one that a lot of people know of the manga, but probably didn't know it was inspired and hugely based on the story, is Inuyasha. And
I had heard that before, and I was very surprised.
Yeah, from the character design, like, Inuyasha's character, you have Milaku, the monk, is supposed to be the lecherous, hedonist. He's Pixie. Kagome is definitely monk, and then there's certain elements of how he can refine Inuyasha with the curse is to the original story. Even how she discovered Inuyasha is exactly how Monk saved Monkey from the original story, and the whole thing. And it's kind of episodic. They embark on the journey. They're looking for the jade or the shards. In the original story, they're trying to fetch the sutra, and then they encounter a lot of monsters. And I think the author of Inuyasha did a really good job of integrating that archetype into Japanese like folklore. All the monsters and stuff is based on like Japanese history. It has the whole Japanese flair, so people don't really like think of, oh, this is a rendition of that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of amazing. That's kind of like one of my biggest inspiration is like how I see someone can borrow certain elements of it and make it a completely different story that no one even think about the original story, but like you can see the spirit of it, you can see the framework. And jumping back to my rendition of it, I call it Monkey, but I would consider the title Unleash the Legend. I think it sounds pretty cool. A lot of the art, what inspired me to actually start the very project is actually a 2007 musical called Monkey Journey to the West. I think it's a musical that premiered in London. And what happened is the director, who's Chinese, he invited Gorillaz, the band, to be the musical producer and character, like concept artist, to kind of do the whole thing. So basically, we all know Gorillaz, it's visually, they're very cool. So Damon Albarn did the whole music based on the stories. And then Jimmy Hewlett, he didn't do any like comic books. I think he just did a few like pinups and character designs. And when I first saw like Jimmy Hewlett's version of just certain characters of Journey to the West, maybe a few scenes as pinups, I was just blown away. I'm like, this looks so cool. However, it's totally westernized. It's like Monkey looks like Gorillaz. It doesn't look like anything. He basically stripped away all the clothing, the classic coloring clothing, the weapon. He doesn't really have a weapon. And then I know you can search online the Jimmy Hewlett Monkey, the headshot. It just looks like a punk rock hero. And that's like, man, I wish there's a comic book. I wish there's a graphic novel because I really want to see more. Obviously, he's not going to do that. And I can't afford to hire Jimmy Hewlett or anything. I'm like, I'm going to do my own. I'm going to try to match the spirit. I'm going to do my own. And then my version, I think the art is inspired by Tank Girl a lot, but it's actually pretty different. I think that's the beauty of building something on top of inspiration. It's like eventually it will iterate into something that's very, very different. And then I'm just very happy, and I'm happy to present this book because I'm very proud of the work, both art and story. I think you've read it, right? Have you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It first thing of reading it, it was like Invincible and The Boys. To me, is that it
Yeah.
has that high energy, really draws you in. But I think I was more happy with seeing, knowing that he was encased for 500 years and that he fell from the sky, which is supposed to be him being
Yeah.
expelled from the heavens for betraying, kind of that whole, and just being carved from the stone or in the egg. I really like the elements, and again, I'm more familiar with the story to a degree, so I like seeing those little elements. But I think your artist that you got and the color, the combination of it, for those that are familiar with the story and what you did, it goes hand in hand. You don't have two different conflicting stories. You got almost a solid state flow, and I think that's what is definitely very successful with this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Basically, my story is the backdrop is 50s, 60s America / I'm jumping back and forth from timelines to timelines, but I've had good feedback of like people don't really get confused when they read like the timeline jump, because it's about like 500 years ago, and after 500 years is in the story is a post-apocalyptic world. Basically, the monkeys' whole cat and mouse chase and conflict with the government inadvertently triggered World War III. I mean, that part is a little bit inspired by Dr. Strangelove. I really like that kind of. It's like, okay, let's just do it anyway, without spoiling the story too much. So yeah, you mentioned the artist and the colorist. Like, I was very happy that I found David, who worked on the line art. Not only he's, I think, technically amazing artist. Also, I like his sense of humor and his vibe. I think he really gets like the vibe of the story and the spirit of it. Instead of just, I can see, for example, a lot of the things he will add like certain elements that's not even in the script, but all the elements that he added, I absolutely love. Like the bathroom scene, the fighting scene, like all the graffiti on the wall. I just when I wrote it, I just like, yeah, it's very decrepit, dilapidated bathroom. You see like garbage every blah blah blah, and he's just drawing like penises on the wall and everything. Oh yeah, that actually makes it more fun. Yeah. So the colorist took me a while to lock down. It's actually harder for me to find a colorist than an artist.
Yes. Yeah, I can definitely. I've talked to enough people. That is a true statement for anyone that listening.
I don't understand why. Somehow I personally do not have an art background, so I can give a few keywords, but I can't really like tell what is good or what is not. I know when I see it. So I know I want something that's like, have you seen like Dorohedoro? Like when they have a few pinups, like those like kind of gritty, but also kind of pops the color. It's very hard to explain. I like a flat kind of 2D kind of cover coloring instead of something that's very, I want to say airbrushed, have a lot of like, because airbrushed coloring, I'm not personally a fan of it. It looks very plasticky to me. I like something that's like, I think a flat color will stand the test of time. That's just my personal opinion. So I probably tested out more than like 10 colorists by just have them coloring the bathroom scene, those 2 pages over and over and over. And every time I was like, no, this is not it. And finally I got Nikos, he's great. And he worked on a lot of stuff for like Boom Studio, Image, IDW. He himself is also a line artist, but he also does color. And I was very happy with when Nikos gave me his version of, okay, this is it. And it's a breeze to work with Nikos and David. And I'm really, really, really happy because, like I said, I can't draw. I have the story, I write everything, but I can't draw. Yeah.
Now this is I'm assuming this is your first book. I don't know, maybe you've already had a previous work, or is this like your first big one?
This is the first one I'm going to release on Kickstarter. This is actually the second graphic novel that I worked on. The first one's finally finished, but I started working on this one because previously I was working on this horror graphic novel. The style is completely different. It's black and white, and it's a more realistic kind of drawing, and it's a standalone story. And I was able to work with this very, very amazing artist from Chile, but he's so slow. Just to skip the whole ordeal. At one point, I thought that story is never going to end. So while waiting for him, I just could not, I can't just stand there and do nothing. I'm like, okay, I have this idea. I'm going to just do this while it's going to take however long it's going to take. I kind of just come to term with that and then started to work on Monkey. And then David and Nikos, they're very fast and expeditious. So somehow this is the second one I worked on and it got finished before the first book. So yeah.
I mean, the good news is you're gonna have 2 books then out at the same time.
Well, let's see if I can launch this one first. It's a very new field for me, you know.
Yeah. So what made you want to launch this one on Kickstarter? Because obviously it's a solid book and you could shop it around. I mean, you could release it on like a web. What made you kind of look at this and say, you know what, I really want to do this like myself. I want to put this through Kickstarter and I want to get this in people's hands.
I think that's the question that's laying before like a lot of creators, not just like comic book, graphic novel. I feel like we come to this weird day and age when on one hand you have a lot of different channels like social media, you know, influencers, creators to have a niche audience of your own. On the other hand, things are very monopolized. You look at movies, only big IPs, Marvel's churning out Marvel stuff like every year, but they would not even invest on something like even like Adam Sandler or Judd Apatow movie. Like those movies are not getting made anymore. And those are very established creators. When I saw the Coen brothers put their movie on like Netflix, the Bella Buster Scruggs, which is, I fucking love them. Sorry, can I curse? I freaking love that movie. Cut this one out. I'm sorry. I really, really love that movie, but it's not even in theaters. I'm like, that's the Coen brothers. That's the indie god in the movie scene, right? And when it comes to like comic books and graphic novels, like I said, I personally, I grew up reading like manga. I'm starting to read more and more American graphic novel and comic books, but I'm not very familiar with this arena. My colorist Nikos kind of told me about, this is kind of the same. If you look at all the big publishers, they're only releasing established franchise that's those characters was coined in the 50s, even 30s. You know, you have Superman, even like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those one like those one are the only one that sells. So as a new creator without like a track record, although I'm very, very confident at the quality of my work, it's really hard to convince a traditional publisher to publish it for you. And even if you sign with them, I mean, what you gain is connections and resources.
Correct.
But if you but you see a lot of like big indie publishers like Boom Studio, IDW, they put their projects on Kickstarter as well. Granted, they have a way bigger audience and email list and everything, but it's the same process. Because I think I chatted with someone recently, and he was older, and he was telling me when he was a kid, comic books are everywhere. You can just go and pick one up. Now, like, it's Barnes and Nobles, you know, there's some like indie comic book store you can go to, but it's kind of went back underground. It's that kind of medium. So I would say I'm glad there's still a platform like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or all these crowdfunding websites that exist that give independent creators like me and a lot of people a chance to even put it to test, see if people like it. You know, it's a blessing, and it's like there's no other choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would say Kickstarter has been almost critical for a lot of indie creators, especially the ones that we've had on our show. They've had a lot of success kind of building up from Instagram and everything. The one thing that is interesting is digital comics are definitely starting to take root. I know Amazon has Comixology, DC, Marvel have their own, the Omnibus app. If you were to fund everything on Kickstarter, everything's great. You know, you met your goal, you got the physical copy. Would you ever look to have a digital presence as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of campaigns I notice when they complete the whole campaign, there's going to be a link that direct them to backer kit and you can
Yeah.
actually purchase it. So I think I would definitely put it like online as a digital copy as well, while I'm like trying to prepare for the launch of the next one. That's definitely the idea is when you think about it, although I'm very jealous and whatever about the established franchise, but think about it, things take time. When you think about
Yeah.
like how the first Batman was introduced, it was like over half a century ago. How can you expect something to just overnight have the same kind of impact and influence of something that existed and stood the test of time of a few generations? So although I'm kind of painting a very bleak picture, but I feel like things really took time. And all these things that you mentioned, like Amazon cosmology and what is it called? Amazon cosmetology,
Comixology.
Comixology, yeah,
Yeah.
and Kickstarter, and BackerKit and everything. They're all channels to kind of build an audience. I wish I started years ago, but it's better now than never.
Exactly. Now obviously this is going to be big. If you get funded, you're going to have a physical copy.
Mhm.
I always like to ask people, especially if this is like, even though for you this is your second, but this might be first book physically out, what it would mean for you to hold like an actual completed book with your name across the bottom, printed cover. Even if you drop them off, like knowing that your comic book got dropped off at an LCS, like you have a few copies that you put. For most people, that's even independent creators, even if it's only 5 copies, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would mean for you just to physically see the end result.
It means a lot because I ran like a test print
Okay.
a few months ago, just like 50 copies just to take a look, and it really is different between like the digital one and the physical one. When you actually open it and see everything, you're kind of amazed by, like, the story, and because you worked on it, everything.
Yep.
Like the back of your hand. But when you see it, you almost like it's seeing something that you never seen before. So it's a, like I said, I feel like indie comic books or graphic novels are financially not rewarding. it's not very financially rewarding, but the reward comes in like a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Then also, especially for this story, like I mentioned, it's a story. The archetype started like 1,000 years ago, and there's so many renditions. But for me, every single rendition and tweak, it's kind of like adding a new brick on this like very beautiful, humongous building. And I'm very honored that I'm adding like my own there. It's kind of like I'm part of like something bigger than this project. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I would say, like, if you were to tell me like, oh, like, this is the book, like I'm working on getting into like the industry, I would say, well, no, you're in the comic industry. Like if someone was to ask, like, do you know a comic creator? Like, like you would be added to the list once we publish this podcast. So like you are in the industry now, even for like I said, when we post this today. So yeah, you are, you're in it, which is great. Because I think a lot of people just like, it's hard for you to step back and realize that like like I said, you are part of the industry. Like if you decided to go get the table like at San Diego Comic-Con, like I don't think anyone, like I wouldn't be surprised, be like, all right, well, yeah, she's a comic book writer or graphic novel writer. Like she's now part of that group. And I think for when you're new and you're really trying to get a foothold, it's really hard to step back and appreciate it just because it feels like you constantly have to be going kind of step after step to keep going and keep building that presence.
I think that's one of the challenges for most creators.
Yeah.
Either is comic book, I'm a stand-up comedian, so it's the same thing for that.
Yeah.
We enter this era that no matter if you want or not, you have to be the salesperson as well. It's not like you have this amazing work. Maybe a lot of people are grandfathered in a few generations back or whatever. People who are 10 years or 15, 20 years older, they can be like, okay, you're good. And then someone can hold your hand. You just work on the art or the story or the creative, then someone else is going to sell it for you. Someone else is going to package it for you. Now those channels are kind of shut. Even if you want to get to that point, first you have to kind of prove yourself to even get noticed by any kind of publisher, agent, or anything. So, and then the first part is it's extremely hard and laborious, is you have to peddle your own stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't think I'm a very good salesperson, nor do I like to sell. Like, some people love it, but for
Yeah.
me, it's like I'm dragging my feet. But it's kind of like I don't have a choice. I have to do this. Like, I dragged this campaign for actually very long. I procrastinated. It's because of the fear of, like, I don't know what I'm doing in terms of selling. I'm very
Yeah.
confident in terms of, like, creating it and, finishing it. But for me, I really hate I did a bad job of selling. Then I love David's art. I love Nikos' coloring. I feel like I'm like failing them. So, but yeah, I'm trying. I wish I didn't really procrastinate and I will have a better foundation. But I'm pretty sure next time when I run my second campaign, I would have learned a lot. And
Oh yeah.
okay, it's annoying, but it's not like impossible. It's just very
No, not at all.
annoying.
Oh yes. Especially when I know I talk to a lot of creators and they look back and they're like, man, I don't know why it took me this long to learn this lesson until the second campaign, but like, man, that would have really sped up my, my first time go around. But it's those lessons that just stack upon you and make it easier. Now, what's amazing is, like I said, this first issue is very good. The writing is very good. And pacing, which is very important. I feel like that gets overlooked in a lot of graphic novels, especially for first time. Was it difficult for you kind of writing in a format that translates well to graphic novel? But obviously you've had some experience in the first time, or was it, since they were such a different genre, was it a little bit more challenging writing this story?
I actually see this. I think it's kind of similar to writing film scripts and TV pilots.
Yeah.
I've written like TV pilots and film scripts on spec, of course, but I've learned a lot through writing those. Like, pacing is something I held very, very important. Like
Yeah.
you said, the original story was done in the totally linear way. So it's like how he was born, how blah, 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 which is good. It's like a very classic hero's journey. And
Yeah.
then when I first write a script, I actually start writing the one when he was born, when he's getting extricated from the paleontologist site. And I was thinking about, okay, if I do this way, I wouldn't be able to introduce the other characters because they're on a different timeline till like issue 3, issue 4. And if you watch like television, good television, like Breaking Bad, you don't want to like, okay, start from the beginning, then just wait till episode 4 when everything comes together. I don't think people have the attention span, and you want to pack the goodies in a way without, making it too rushed. So that's why, okay, if I treat it as a TV pilot, usually there's a teaser to give you some idea to kind of like evoke some kind of interest. Like, okay, what could have happened? And then we can go back to how they all happened. So that kind of made me rethink everything. So I kind of, I edited the script in a lot of different ways. I actually threw away like 80 pages of content that I wrote. Like, okay, I don't think this is going to be ready till issue 3 or 4 because of the pacing. Because I would really like, where's the action? I want the action to be there as soon as possible. I want to introduce those interesting characters and dynamic as soon as possible. So I'm like, okay, let me jump back and forth from 2 timelines. But I was pretty careful when it comes to jumping from timelines. First, I want to make sure the backdrop looks completely different, so there is no confusion that, okay, is it where when is this happening? Second, I always want to have a connecting tissue of like, okay, how when you jump the timeline, you should have like a common thing. When it's kind of like a montage, we focus on this one character. Like, for example, I just watched a movie recently, The Rise of Planet of the Apes. The 2011 fantastic movie. When they show like how Caesar was growing up, right? It was a little chimp, and he was like swinging in the house, and then you focus on the eyes, and the eyes changed. He's a teenager now. That's kind of how I do. But you need to have that kind of connecting tissue, that shot of the eyes changing, to okay, so people know, okay, you're doing a time jump. You're talking about you're taking us somewhere else. It's almost like a sign in an amusement park, so you understand where you're at. So it's kind of like a journey. So I hope I keep maintaining the kind of pacing Like you don't want it to be like, like a Michael Bay movie. No shade, but just fighting scene of
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the interesting thing is when I was sourcing for artists, a lot of their portfolio is purely just like fist fighting in the parking lot.
Yep.
Because I think, yeah, that's how you show your, yeah, obviously, if you have an impactful, like big splash page, that does show your skill as a comic book artist. But I want to see flow. I want to see how you flow from panel to panel. How do you tell the story? And that doesn't necessarily show up in one like splash page. So that's the disadvantages if you just like only think about, okay, I want to pack this epic fighting scene, and after fighting scene, and it's another fighting scene, But then on the other hand, you don't want it to be like a, like a classic fantasy. I want to say like fantasy novel. Most fantasy novel, it's like really descriptive, and then it's like 1,000 pages, and things don't happen until like 200 pages in. We're still talking about his childhood. Like people ain't got time for that. So I'm trying to strike a balance between these two approaches. I want it to be engaging. I want it to hook you, but also I want to kind of, when it's time to kind of slow down and really build up the character, I want to be able to do that as well. Yeah,
definitely. No, and I think you've struck a very good balance. Just enough action to keep everyone entertained. I mean, definitely the first few pages, but it gives you enough story as you go to the time jump that everything was very, very well kind of in a state of flow. There was no confusion at all by reading it. I was very happy with it. Pacing for me is critical. No matter how many times people make fun of me, I need it because that's the whole thing about what makes a comic great. It kind of takes that from that good to great.
There are two. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Yeah,
they're two.
Just jumping off the whole pacing thing, there are like two pieces of work that I consider like it's a masterclass like for pacing. First is like I said, I read a lot of manga. Junji Ito, he's one of the best like horror manga writer. Especially his short piece, like he is a master in terms of like building up suspense, the big reveal, and everything. If you like study that, and that's kind of like a very good textbook and case study in terms of what is a good pacing. But that's on a very like small scale, right? Like I actually prefer his short stories. He has a few very good like long stories, but like the short snatches are really good. Second one is Joe Hill's graphic novel Lock and Key.
Yes,
like
very
that
good.
one. To be honest, I'm not a fan of the style of the art. Art is good. It's just not my personal style. But the story and the pacing and the flow and how they introduce new characters, it's to me it was amazing. Like I was actually reading that like, man, this is fun. I don't like the TV show. I think they ruined the book. But the book itself is so good. So yeah, I always keep that in mind when I see something that does a very good job of doing that. Because a lot of like Japanese manga, especially those like very popular long ongoing series, it's not their fault. They want to keep selling it. They want to have 300 episodes. When you only maybe have 40 episodes of things, they're just like, okay, now Naruto goes to the woods for 10 episodes and trying to find this bug. I was like, what are you doing?
We all know the One Piece dilemma very, very well.
Like Dragon Ball Z, like a fight will last for 20 episodes, and there's just 5 episodes, just people getting surprised about, oh my god, he can do that? I don't know he can do that.
Yes,
like you're just surprised 100 episodes ago. You're still surprised what he's capable of.
Yes. Now the crazy thing is, Journey to the West obviously has. I don't even know if I could really call that it has an ending per se, but kind of. Now the nice thing too about this medium that you're creating with your story, is it easier for you knowing that there is an ending that you can at least kind of wrap like a first story arc around? Maybe you already have plans for doing a spinoff or something down the future.
I like the flexibility of the story because the backstory, to be honest, like once the journey starts, it becomes very episodic. Yes, it has an ending, but there's a lot of things you can just add 100 more, encounters and whatever, and make it like pretty episodic. What really has an ending is his backstory. That has a very clear beginning, middle, end. And the end is actually, so that's the book is twofold. before the journey and after the journey. Before the journey is all Monkey's backstory. And then it was like, okay, all the journey starts. It's very interesting. So that one has a finite beginning, middle, and end. But what I like it is I kind of try to, the way I encapsulate the story, that becomes flexible and expandable as well. Because I set a backdrop as the Cold War era, America, 50s, 60s. I'm very interested in the whole Forrest Gumpish alt history kind of telling. So when you think about it, you're tying real historical figures, real historical events, the space monkey experiment, the Cold War, this whole spy, the military doing LSD, experiment on all that, Marilyn Monroe, all the pop culture kind of thing. That become like a treasure trove that I can draw from. So when I try to write a story, down the road, what I'm gonna try to do is to make sure there are gaps left on purpose. It's like, okay, now the next time you see Monkey, he's already here. It's not necessarily that we follow him every single second. So I can always trace back and then, okay, let me explain this part of the story. So in that sense, in my plan, both storyline becomes flexible and expendable. And it's like up to me and up to the the longevity of the series to see, how big the world can expand from that point. But I do like that kind of flexibility. Yes.
Definitely. Now the other thing that's I think more interesting and more relevant nowadays is everyone has a multiverse. You look at all the big publishers. It's easier. Yeah. It gives you so much room. For an independent creator, I think a lot of times you really fall in love too with your first book or your first like big character. Like it's fun to write. Monkey's one of those characters that I think everyone is just gonna love. Would you ever see yourself when this is either said or done, or you've completed the tale you want it to tell, putting him in another story or having him make a cameo if you were to make another story or an original story and
that'd
kind of including him in it?
Yeah. I haven't thought about it, but now you mentioned it, it might be a very interesting idea. But I think that's like step 22.
Oh yeah,
so I might step 1. Yeah, but it's interesting to fantasize about the potential of a project, right? So
the Monkeyverse.
The Monkeyverse.
The Monkeyverse.
You know what? I definitely fantasize about the merge will be fantastic. Like I don't think it's gonna be really hard to be successful enough to even have real merch, not just like posters, like t-shirts and stuff like that. Like those are so character-based. I'm pretty surprised that even there are renditions of Journey to the West in the West. When you talk to people, not a lot of people really know the story. They vaguely know Monkey King. That's about it. That's about most people. I feel like they deserve a space in Hot Topic. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
This will be everyone listening that is in a Hot Topic. You want to put some t-shirts out. We know the right people. Hit us up.
Yep.
And I think last, before we wrap everything up and we get everyone the information on when this is coming out, obviously you've had a lot of experience now. And like I said, this was definitely a big undertaking, taking source material and making a story. If you had to share a bit of advice for the one thing that you felt, or just in general, that could help anyone that's in their writing career or trying to do the exact same thing you're trying to do, what would be that one piece of advice or kind of guideline?
I think my one piece of advice that I wish myself had followed is don't start with a big project as your first or second. I'm glad I got it done, and it was dragging over a few years. It shouldn't be that way. I believe the best way to go about any kind of project, creative wise, is to take baby steps and iterate on top of something. For example, if this is the first time you want to make a graphic novel or a comic book, it's not a bad idea to start with 12 pages and just to get it out there. And because the stake is lower, and then you learn. Every time you do something, you finish something, you actually learn from it. And then 12 pages can become 24 pages, then become 48. Then if you want to do a series, do a series. If you start too big, I'm glad I finished it, but there's risk of like people dropping out, life got in the way, you just don't see an end to it. And then if the first one fail, you just feel so demoralized that this is, so start baby steps, because every single time when you finish something, even if it's just a small like Lego building block, you learn from that, and then you can apply to the next. Start building on things, and then I wish I've done that. I feel like it will actually speed up the whole process instead of just like, okay, I'm gonna do this epic. You just want to do this epic. That's I'm not saying it's impossible, but you might be. It's too big of a cake for you to chew.
Definitely. I think that's great advice. I think, and it was actually at the last Comic-Con, they had what was it? Chip Zdarsky, Tim Seeley, a lot of big names from DC, who said, even if you're trying to get discovered or whatnot, just put something out there, even if it's just a 6-page comic that shows your writing or your art. At least you have something to show that's a completed project. Because they, and it was very interesting. Even I think the talent manager said 6 pages written well and drawn well is always going to be better than giving me 50 pages with an incomplete story and very little art, which makes complete sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's why when you go to IMDb and see like filmmaker or screenwriters like journey, even successful ones, because I like to do that kind of tracking all the time. The first or second credit is always a short. There's a reason for that. It's cheaper to produce, it's easier to finish, it's a proof of concept. And then they can move on and embark on like bigger stuff. I think that's the modular way of working is something I wish I have learned. I think I was just getting too excited and passionate. I'm like, I'm going to just start this epic thing, an ongoing series of 12 issues right now. Like, glad it got finished, but it almost did not. It almost did, because I was like, man, this is taking, my artist is getting burnout. He's getting crazy. I'm getting crazy, but I'm glad we were able to kind of jump over that hurdle, and now we're here. I really hope the Kickstarter will fund. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, speaking of that, we're excited. I think everyone that will give it a chance and give it a read is going to very much like it. When is it coming out? Where can we find the Kickstarter? What's the information you have for everyone listening?
Cool. Yeah. So the Kickstarter for issue 1 of Monkey, which is 62 pages, fully colored, completely finished, will be live on Kickstarter on June 11th. So we're filming this on June 4th. So a little bit about a week from now, so June 11th, you can go to Kickstarter and search Monkey, and we'll be there. And you can also follow us on Instagram. Our handle is Monkey Comic, one word, all lowercase, Monkey Comic, and we will share updates, screenshots, and keep you guys updated on the next issue and everything. So at the moment, like I mentioned, the first issue is completely finished. The second issue is almost finished too. The script and line work is done. It's just pending coloring and lettering, but most of the work has already been done. So we can guarantee that the first 2 issues, it's a deliver. You're not going to wait for something that might or might not finish. It's been done, and I deliver. Yeah.
Perfect. And everyone listening that is interested, we will have those links in the comments and in our Instagram when the time comes. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, this was a great read. Anyone that's not familiar with Journey to the West, or you've never even heard of it, this is the perfect jumping off point. It's got a fun story. And like I said, I think you captured the original story with your own spin on it very well. And I can't wait to see it all play out.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's really fun talking to you. And, yeah.
Perfect. All right. Everyone listening, you can listen to this wherever you get your podcasts from, and you can also find this on YouTube, and we will have the link on Instagram. Everyone, thank you for listening. Have a good night.
Have a good night.